Hi guys and welcome back to Sheddy's Kitchen. I'm Sheddy. Today, as per a viewer's request, so this one is specifically for Julia, we are looking at making a vegan recipe. It's actually aloo gobi curry. Aloo is potato, gobi is cauliflower. So you normally find this on a restaurant menu quite often in many of these Indian restaurants if you go to them. So this is a vegan recipe and it goes really well with our chapatti recipe. It can go with our Paratha recipe as well. So if you want to look at accompanying them with this curry, just make sure you do that as well. And we do have videos for that in our YouTube channel. So are you ready? Let's get cooking. So for this recipe, you're going to need 275 ml of sunflower oil, 250 grams of chopped onions, and you can see they've been chopped quite small over there in small pieces. 1 teaspoon of cooking salt, 1 teaspoon of red chili powder, 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric powder, and that's known as haldi. For the next bit, you're going to need some ginger and some garlic. I'm just showing you this together so you understand how we tend to do it, because we tend to make it in larger batches. But you need 1 teaspoon of crushed ginger. You need 1 teaspoon of crushed garlic as well. And what we've done is we've just mixed them together over here. As you can see, that's actually a ginger and garlic mix. But you need 1 teaspoon of the ginger, 1 teaspoon of the garlic. So we'll be using 2 teaspoons of this in total because it's a mix. But if you've got the garlic separate and you've got the ginger separate, it's 1 teaspoon of each. You'll need 3 medium-sized green chillies that have been chopped. Three medium tomatoes that have been chopped as well. 350 grams of chopped potatoes. You can see the pieces, they're not massively small, they're fine. And that's the general size you're looking at over there. The next thing you're going to need is the cauliflower. Now I've not weighed the cauliflower because you tend to get cauliflower in 3 different sizes. So you get them as a small, a medium and a large. For this recipe in particular, we're using a medium sized one. Stick with the medium sized one because the ingredients I'm giving you are based on a medium size, a dish that's going to use a medium sized cauliflower. And what we do over here, you can see, is you've got the heads of the cauliflower over here. And you can see on the left hand side, we've cut away the stem. So the bottom parts, the stems actually do come. So the edible bit, normally the top bit, is sometimes referred to as the curd, but it's just the head of the cauliflower. So it's referred to as the head of the cauliflower, which you can see over there. So I'll just take a tiny bit off. So if you just look over here, that's the head of the cauliflower, that's edible, that's known as a curd. That's stem underneath. So right at the bottom, we've cut the bottom parts off. The reason why we separate them out is these are harder, the stems are actually harder at the bottom, and they need a bit longer to cook, so we actually put them into the pan earlier. So this is actually a medium sized cauliflower that we've chopped over here in preparation. You need 1 teaspoon of dry coriander powder, 25 grams of fresh coriander as well. And finally, I won't put this onto the ingredient list, but what you need as a final thing, a tiny bit of water during the cooking process. That's again to prevent any sticking to the bottom of the pan. So get yourself a nice big pan and make sure you've got any windows or doors open, because there will be a lot of concentrated smell going around. And let's get going. So what you need to do is pop this onto the heat underneath the pan to a high heat. So we're going to leave it on a high heat throughout the whole process. The first stage over here is to get your sunflower oil and pop that in. And let that warm up for a tiny bit before I add the onions to it. It shouldn't take too long for that to happen, so just give it a bit of time to start heating up before we add the onions, and just want the oil bubbling very slightly. You'll know that when you add the onions to it, it'll start sizzling when we add that in. Okay, see little bubbles rising in the oil now, so I'm just going to add the onions, that'll be ready. So pop it and you can hear the sizzle there, so that's perfect. I'm just going to leave the onion in there, give it a bit of a mix and try to soften them down and hopefully just get them a lovely light brown colour. And give that a little bit of a mix. Make sure you saturate all the onions in there with the oil. I've just kept a glass of water handy. I normally do that because as we start adding the spices into this, if you do find it sticking a bit later on, just always add a tiny dash of water in there to prevent the spices sticking to the bottom of the pan, because you don't want that burnt taste running right through. So we'll leave this onion for a bit, just to soften up. Giving it a stir every so often so that the onions not sticking and it all getting mixed up and getting an even heat. We've got quite a large pan here, and when you've only got one, we're using a gas cooker here. When you've got the gas on there, you get heat tends to be concentrated in one part of the pan, so just make sure you mix that around if you're working from the same. Just be patient during this process. You can see tinges of brown around the edges of the onions, but it does take a bit of time because we're using, the dish we're making is for quite a lot of people. So because we're doing it in a larger amount, it just takes that a bit longer. So it is browning. I can see it's starting to, the onions starting to soften out. Like I said, there are tinges of brown around the edge of the sunny onions, but it needs to get browner than that. Really interesting thing to note about cauliflower, the cauliflower dish that we're doing, is that your Brussels sprouts, your broccoli, your cauliflower, your cabbage, your kale, your kohlrabi, they all actually come from the same plant. They all have actually been selectively bred over the last few hundred years from a plant. It's a wild mustard plant that it's come from, and the cauliflower is actually the flower buds of the actual plant. So that's where they've come from. Because I'm not sure what the wildflower mustard plant was used for, but they've taken parts of the plant and just selectively bred it over time. So the 6 that I mentioned, there's more than 6, but the 6 that I mentioned all actually originate, they're all the same species, they've come from the same plant completely. Bit of science for you there. These are starting to brown very slightly now. These are starting to brown now. You can see areas where it's starting to brown on there. I'm just going to give it about 20 more seconds before I start adding some of the ingredients in. Right, let's get adding some more ingredients into this. So you're going to add your salt to it now. Just a reminder, that was a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of chili powder, half a teaspoon of the haldi, which is the turmeric powder. Give that a good, nice mix now. Add a little dash of water into there to prevent the spices sticking in to them. So a tiny bit of water. There. Give that a little mix so it's not sticking to the bottom. Okay, add in 2 teaspoons of the ginger. Well, it's 1 teaspoon of the ginger, 1 teaspoon of the garlic, but I've got it as a mix, so I'm going to do 2 teaspoons in there. So pop 1 and 2, and I'm going to mix that for about a minute now. Just a minute before I add the next 2 ingredients. Make sure you keep mixing here, because you can feel like that area here where it does stick to the bottom of the pan, and you need to just add a tiny bit of water to prevent that happening. It's quite important with the onions not burning, because if they do burn it won't taste nice at the end. I've mentioned this in previous videos already as well before, but don't trust yourself with that. Have the confidence. If you can feel that it's sticking a bit, just drop a tiny bit of water into there and give it a good mix so that sticking disappears. Right, I'm going to add in now the chillies and the tomatoes to that. I've been mixing that for about a minute, so let's put all the chillies in. That was 3 chillies, medium-sized chillies if you remember. And the tomatoes will release some water that will help a bit with the cooking process here, because when it does release water, it's very sticky. I'm going to mix that now for a bit. Good mix. A lot of water being released from the tomatoes straight away there. As you can see, a lot of water. That's good. You have to give it a good stir. It's been about 3 or 4 minutes now, so I'm going to add the coriander powder now. So we need to add a teaspoon of that. I'm going to give that a mix that for about a minute or so, and then we'll get to adding the potatoes and the stems of the cauliflower into there. Remember, if it is sticking, do add a bit of water to the bottom if you need to. Mine's okay at the moment. Can't feel it sticking anywhere. Tomatoes are breaking down lovely now, getting quite mushy in there. You can see it. That's the consistency you're looking for, a bit of a mush really. But we'll get that going a tiny bit longer before we add the potatoes into there, and the stems, the hard bits of the cauliflower, the bottom stems. We'll add them in. Okay, time to add the potatoes. We'll pop in the potatoes into there now. And I'll also add the stems of the cauliflower in. Give that a real mix. Remember, the cauliflower stems do go in earlier because they are harder. They need to soften up for a bit longer. I'll pop that into there and we'll give that a nice mix. I'm going to carry on mixing this for a bit. If you do see a bit of sticking in there, add a tiny bit of water because it's likely to stick at the stage, but just a tiny bit of water. You don't need a huge amount. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix this on for about 2 minutes or so. What you want to happen over here is you want to get the potatoes half cooked. And we could test that with a knife. We'll show you, we'll test that with a knife when that's half cooked before we add anything more to this. So this has been on the heat now for about 5 minutes or so. We just keep mixing it, add a bit of water if it gets quite sticky at the bottom. And we need to just check the potatoes at this stage, and a good way to check if the potatoes are half cooked is by getting yourself a little knife. You can do it with a spoon if you want, if you're comfortable, but if you get it with a bit of knife, I'll just show you at the top here, you can see the knife actually cuts quite easily into the potato. That means that's actually half cooked now, that's ready. We want to add the cauliflower now, the cauliflower heads that's left over. Let's add that, give it a good mix. You will be adding more water to this later on, a tiny bit more, because this is quite dry, the ingredient that's going in. I'm just going to give that a real mix and just cover it with all these lovely spices as much as I can. Give it a good mix. Like that. Quite a dry ingredient going in. The water's going to be absorbing quite quickly and it'll get dry quite quickly, so we will add a bit more water in a moment as we stir that. And what we want to happen is we want over time for the cauliflower heads to start breaking easily. If you've got larger pieces, you can break them down with your cooking spoon a bit later on, that's not a problem, but you want to be doing that right. We need to add water to that now. Be a tiny bit more generous with the water, give that a mix. And it's quite hard to mix, there's quite a lot in there, so really get stuck in and keep stirring this. Now the cauliflower heads are starting to soften. Just keep giving that a nice mix. Go around into the centre. There's no sticking on the bottom. Again, if there is sticking, just do add a bit of water. One of the ways in which we make this slightly different from what I remember it as being younger was Mum used to put ginger pieces in, like solid pieces, and not actually crush them down. Now I was never fond, that's the only thing I'm not fond of, is biting into large chunks of ginger. I don't like the taste of it when it's in larger pieces. So over time Mum has just started to crush that to just make it more easier for me to eat. Actually, I don't mind. I love all my veg dishes. I don't mind. I'm not a fussy eater whatsoever. But when it comes to ginger, that's the only thing. If it's in larger pieces, I don't like eating that. Two things I don't like. I don't like biting into ginger pieces, and I don't like biting into cardamom seeds either. They're the two things best avoided for me. I do appreciate they need to be in there, but as long as they're crushed and I don't really bite into them, I'm alright with that. Cauliflower is definitely softening now. Any larger pieces, if you can break them, and just aid the cooking. It just increases the surface area where the heat's actually getting to, but you can break them down if you see some big pieces. But they are definitely starting to soften now. And the spoon's going through them really, really well. So we've been mixing that for about 10 minutes now. It's really, really soft. The cauliflower is really softened down. We keep on adding water to that as and when it sticks. We're right towards the end now. So this is pretty much ready because they've been cooking away. The potatoes have really softened as well. We don't want to break it down any further. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to drop this to a low heat. I'm going to pop in the chopped fresh coriander in a moment, and we'll get to the final stage. So, okay, that's onto a low heat now. I'll add the fresh coriander to that and give that a real mix once I've done that. I'm saving a tiny bit towards the end just for the dish, but this needs to be added in at this point over here. That's it. Give that a nice mix. Get that coriander mixed in evenly. And there you go. And I'm just going to pop a lid onto the actual pan. We're going to leave that for a minute longer, and that's it. Once the minute's passed, you can take it off heat, and that'll be done. Now, doesn't that look amazing? That is low calorie, perfect for you slimmers out there, and it's beautiful, and it's a vegan recipe. So should we get my parents' reaction? Let's go. Perfect. Right, seal of approval met. If you want to follow many more of my recipes, we've got a whole list of them now on my YouTube channel. So click that like button, click that bell so you get notifications, and make sure you subscribe. Thank you. See you soon.